My name is Carissa. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in the heart of Chicago. My entire career is built on protecting other people's money, spotting risks, securing assets, and planning for the future. I have a reputation for being meticulous, the kind of person who reads the fine print 3 times before signing. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent my days safeguarding millions for wealthy clients. Yet I failed to protect my own life savings from the people who share my blood. For 5 years, I didn't just save money. I starved my social life and suffocated my desires. I made sacrifices that most people my age would find laughable. Last month, our annual family reunion was supposed to be a weekend of nostalgia and bonding. Instead, it became the crime scene where my own sister, Tiffany, and her husband, Brandon, executed a plan to strip me of everything I owned. When I finally confronted them, Brandon didn't apologize. He didn't look down in shame. He simply sneered and said words that still haunt me in the quiet of my empty apartment. But before I tell you what he said, and trust me, you won't believe the audacity, I need to tell you how we got there. If you've ever had family who mistook your kindness for weakness, hit that subscribe button. You are not alone. My life in Chicago was a study in discipline. While my colleagues at Meridian Partners were leasing luxury condos and ordering $30 salads for lunch, I was living in a shoebox apartment on the north side. It was a 1-bedroom cramp with questionable plumbing, but it was cheap. I drove a 10-year-old Honda that rattled when it hit 60 mph, but it was paid off. I brought a brown bag lunch every single day. My friends stopped inviting me to happy hours because I always ordered tap water and the cheapest appetizer. They called me boring. I called myself focused. I had a vision. I wanted a brownstone in Lincoln Park. Not a mansion, not a status symbol. Just a cozy 3-bedroom home with history, creaky floors, and a garden where I could finally put down roots. I wanted security. For 5 agonizing years, I funneled 30% of every paycheck into a high-yield savings account. I skipped my best friend's bachelorette trip to Cabo. I bought my clothes at thrift stores. I lived like a ghost in a city that never sleeps, all for that down payment. My younger sister, Tiffany, was my polar opposite. Growing up, she was the golden child, the charismatic, bubbly social butterfly who could charm our parents out of a grounding with a single smile. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who didn't need attention because I was low maintenance. 3 years ago, Tiffany met Brandon. From the moment he shook my hand, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He was undeniably charming, with perfectly gelled hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He spoke in buzzwords, always talking about his entrepreneurial ventures and future equity. But if you pressed him for details, the conversation would evaporate. Within 6 months, they were married. It was a lavish ceremony that my parents paid for, putting a significant dent in their own retirement funds. I watched from the sidelines, biting my tongue. After the wedding, Tiffany changed. The sister who used to text me 50 times a day became a stranger. She became secretive. When we did talk, it was always about the expensive lifestyle Brandon promised her, the lifestyle that was always just around the corner once his next big deal closed. But the deals never closed. Instead, the request started. It began small, a classic manipulation tactic. Brandon needed $200 to fix a flat tire. He'd pay me back Friday. Friday never came. Then it was $500 for a guaranteed investment that would triple in a month. Then $1,000 for rent because of a payroll error. Every time I tried to say no, I was villainized. "You're so selfish, Carissa," my mother would say. "Family helps family. You're single, you have no kids, you have disposable income. They're struggling." I was the bad guy for having boundaries. Last year, when Tiffany called sobbing that their electricity was being cut, I paid the $300 bill directly to the utility company. A week later, she posted a story on Instagram of her and Brandon eating a $200 steak dinner downtown. When I confronted her, she blocked me. Despite the drama, I had finally reached the summit. I had $87,000 sitting in my account. My real estate agent, Diane, had found the one, a property 2 blocks from the park. It needed work, but it had good bones. The market was cutthroat, and Diane warned me, when the seller accepts, we move fast. The timing was terrible. The annual family reunion at my parents' lake cabin in Michigan was that same weekend. It was a 3-hour drive from Chicago to the 20-acre property my grandfather had built. I debated skipping it to stay close to my email, but tradition guilt-tripped me into going. I thought, I can do both. I can be a good daughter and a homeowner. That decision cost me my future. I pulled up the gravel driveway, the scent of pine and lake water hitting me instantly. Cars were already jammed onto the grass. Uncle Robert's booming laugh echoed from the backyard. For a split second, I felt peace. Then I saw Brandon. That was the first red flag. Brandon usually ignored me, treating me like a walking ATM he couldn't access. Today, he was walking toward me with arms wide open. "Carissa, so good to see you." He grabbed my overnight bag before I could protest. "You look incredible. That corporate life is treating you well, huh?" My stomach churned. I hadn't told him anything about my work. I thanked him stiffly and scanned the porch for Tiffany. She was there, watching us. When our eyes met, she flinched and immediately started reorganizing a cooler. Red flag number 2. As we walked to the cabin, the sunlight caught Brandon's wrist. I stopped walking. He was wearing a Rolex Submariner. I know asset values. That was easily a $10,000 watch. Then, he pulled out the newest top-tier smartphone, the one that had just been released that week. "Business is good?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Finally taking off. Investments, it's all very technical." Inside, the cabin was chaotic and warm. Mom was making her potato salad. Dad was handling the grill. But Tiffany was acting like a cat on a hot tin roof. She was jittery, unable to sit still. On her wrist, a diamond tennis bracelet glittered. This was the same woman who, a month ago, claimed they were eating ramen noodles to save money. Dinner that night was outdoors, overlooking the lake. I sat next to my cousin Emma, and I couldn't help myself. I spilled the beans about the house. "It's perfect, Emma. 3 bedrooms, original hardwood. I'm putting the offer in on Monday." I noticed the chatter at the other end of the table die down. Brandon had leaned in. "That's amazing, Carissa," he said, his voice smooth. "So you're ready to close? You have the liquidity? Like, all the cash is in one account ready to wire?" In hindsight, it was an interrogation. At the moment, I thought it was just conversation. "Yes," I beamed, proud of my discipline. 5 years of saving, it's all sitting there, ready to go. After dinner, during cleanup, Brandon approached me. He looked frantic. "Carissa, I'm so sorry to ask. My phone just died, and I'm waiting on a critical email from a partner. Can I borrow yours for literally 2 minutes? I just need to check my Gmail." I didn't even think. I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. "Sure, just bring it back when you're done." My mom yelled for help with the dishes, and I stepped into the kitchen. I was gone for 15 minutes. When I came back to the living room, Brandon was sitting calmly on the sofa. He handed the phone back. "Thanks, you're a lifesaver." Later that night, as I lay in the bunk bed across from Emma, I checked my notifications. My banking app had been opened. I frowned. Did I check my balance earlier? I couldn't remember. I dismissed it as a pocket dial or a glitch. I was tired, and the fresh lake air was making me heavy-eyed. The rest of the weekend was a blur of forced happiness. Fishing, hiking, s'mores. Tiffany was unusually clingy. On Sunday, as I packed up to leave, she hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "Drive safe, okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just take care of yourself." Brandon gave me a pat on the back. "Thanks for everything, Carissa. We appreciate you." I drove back to Chicago feeling optimistic. Maybe Brandon was turning a corner. Maybe Tiffany was happy. I had no idea that while I was driving down I-94, my life was already in ruins. Monday morning, the day. I woke up at 6 a.m., fueled by adrenaline. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the photos of the house. This was it. At 8:30 a.m., I called Diane. "Diane, I'm ready. Let's submit the offer." "Great," she chirped. "Transfer the funds to your checking so we can cut the earnest money check immediately." "On it," I said. I hung up. I opened my banking app. I entered my password. The little loading circle spun for what felt like an eternity. When the balance screen popped up, I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and blinked again. Current balance, $3,211.28. The room tilted. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. No, that's a mistake. That's a display error. I force closed the app, reopened it. 3,211.28. A cold sweat broke out over my entire body. I went to the transaction history, my thumbs shaking so hard I kept hitting the wrong buttons. And there they were. Friday night, $29,000 transfer to external account. Saturday afternoon, $29,000 transfer to external account. Sunday morning, $29,000 transfer to external account. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Identity theft, Russian hackers, a bank glitch. I called the bank's fraud department, my voice hysterical. After 45 minutes of torture on hold, an agent answered. "Ma'am, I see the transactions," she said calmly. "But I have to be honest. These transfers were authorized. They were initiated from your trusted mobile device, using your biometrics and passcodes." "That's impossible," I screamed. "I was at a cabin. I didn't touch my money." "Did anyone else have access to your unlocked device?" she asked. The memory hit me like a physical punch to the gut. Brandon, the dead battery, the urgent email, the questions about the liquidity, the Rolex, the new SUV they drove up in, the guilt in Tiffany's eyes. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my life. They stole 5 years of eating ramen and thrifting clothes. They stole my brownstone. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry, not yet. I felt a cold, dark rage spreading through my veins. I dialed Tiffany. Straight to voicemail. I dialed Brandon. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Are Tiffany and Brandon there?" "Oh, hi, honey. Yes, they just stopped by," Mom chirped happily. "You won't believe it. Brandon's investments paid off. They bought a brand new black Cadillac Escalade. It's stunning. They're talking about taking us all to Disney World. Investments paid off. New Escalade. Disney World." Every word was a nail in the coffin of my sanity. "Mom, I have to go," I said, and hung up before I screamed. I sat on my floor, staring at the wall. My best friend Julia told me to call the police immediately. "Carissa, this is a felony," she said. "But it's my sister," I whispered. "That makes it worse," Julia countered. "If you don't stop them, who will?" I grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to the police station. Not yet. I was going to their house. I needed to look them in the eyes. I needed to see if they had souls. The 2-hour drive to the suburbs was a blur of red rage. When I turned onto their street, I saw it. Parked in their driveway, gleaming in the sun, was a brand new black Cadillac Escalade. It still had the dealer plates. Through the front window, I could see them. There were shopping bags everywhere, designer logos. Tiffany was holding up a dress. They were celebrating. They were spending my brownstone. I slammed my car door and marched up the driveway. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I rang the doorbell. Brandon opened it. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but then he leaned against the doorframe, casual as ever. "Carissa, bit of a surprise. We're kind of busy celebrating." "We need to talk," I said, my voice ice cold. "Now." He shrugged and stepped aside. "Sure, come on in." I walked into the lion's den, clutching my phone with the bank statement open. I had no idea that what was about to happen would tear my family apart forever. I stepped into their living room, and the air smelled like expensive leather and fresh department store perfume. It was the smell of my money. Tiffany was standing in the middle of the room, freezing mid-motion. She was pulling a bright orange Hermes box out of a shopping bag. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. Not with welcome, but with the distinct panic of a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar. She quickly shoved the box behind a throw pillow, as if hiding the evidence would erase the crime. "Carissa," she stammered, her voice high and thin, We weren't expecting you." "I bet you weren't," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I scanned the room. It looked like Christmas morning for the rich and famous. There were bags from Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and Saks Fifth Avenue scattered across the floor. A new 65-inch OLED TV box sat in the corner. On the coffee table lay a glossy brochure, Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa, VIP package. My stomach twisted. That was my down payment. That was my hardwood floors. That was my garden. It was all scattered on this beige carpet in the form of luxury goods they didn't earn and certainly didn't deserve. Brandon closed the front door behind me, the latch clicking with a sound that felt like a prison cell closing. He walked past me, casually picking up a new iPhone box from the table. "So," he said, peeling the plastic wrap off, "to what do we owe the pleasure? You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned to him, holding up my phone. The screen was still glowing with the transaction history. "Drop the act, Brandon. I know what you did." He didn't flinch. He didn't even look up from his new toy. "I have no idea what you're talking about." $87,000, I said, stepping closer. 3 transfers, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All authorized from my phone while you were borrowing it to check an email. You stole my life savings. Tiffany let out a small whimper and looked at Brandon, waiting for his cue. Brandon finally looked at me. The friendly mask from the reunion was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "Stole is such a harsh word," he sneered. "I'd call it a reallocation of family resources." My jaw dropped. "Reallocation? You committed grand larceny. That money was for my house." "Oh, the house," Brandon laughed, shaking his head. "The brownstone, the solitary castle for the lonely princess. Come on, Carissa, be realistic. You're single. You have no kids. You make good money. You can just save it up again. We have a family. We have actual needs." "Needs?" I pointed at the designer bags. "You call a Louis Vuitton purse a need? You call a Cadillac Escalade a need?" "We have an image to maintain," Brandon snapped, his voice suddenly aggressive. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to drive a rust bucket? Do you know what it's like to see everyone else living the good life while we scrape by? You wouldn't understand. You've always had it easy. The good grades, the good job, the perfect credit score." I turned to Tiffany, desperate for a shred of humanity. "Tiffany, please, tell me you didn't agree to this. That's 5 years of my life, 5 years of sacrifices. How could you let him do this?" Tiffany looked at the floor, wringing her hands. The diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the light. "You don't understand, Carissa," she whispered. "It's been so hard for us. Brandon has been so stressed. We needed a break. And you're always so strong. You'll be fine. You always figure it out." The betrayal cut deeper than the theft. My own sister was justifying robbing me because I was strong, because I was responsible. They were punishing me for my discipline to fund their delusion. "I'm going to the police," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm leaving here, and I'm going straight to the precinct." The room went deadly silent. Brandon took a step toward me. He was taller than me, broader, and for the first time, I felt physically unsafe. He loomed over me, invading my personal space. "You're not going to do that," he said quietly. "Watch me," I challenged, though my knees were shaking. "If you go to the police," Brandon hissed, leaning down so his face was inches from mine, "I will make sure Mom and Dad never speak to you again. I'll tell them you're lying. I'll tell them you gave us the money as a gift and then got jealous and tried to take it back. Who do you think they'll believe? The daughter who gives them grandkids and visits every week? Or the cold, career-obsessed spinster who cares more about money than family?" "They won't believe you," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I knew my parents. I knew their blind spot for Tiffany. "Try me," Brandon grinned. It was a shark's grin. "Go ahead. Destroy the family. Break Mom's heart. Send your sister's husband to jail. See how that works out for you at Thanksgiving. It's not stealing when it's family," Tiffany piped up, her voice gaining a strange, warped confidence from Brandon's aggression. "It's sharing. You have so much, Carissa. Why are you being so greedy?" Greedy. I had eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner for 3 years. I hadn't bought new shoes until the soles wore through. And they, standing amidst a pile of loot worth more than my car, were calling me greedy. Something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way, but in a way that signaled the end of who I used to be. The doormat was gone. "You're right," I said softly. Brandon blinked, surprised. I am going to figure it out," I said. "But not the way you think." I turned around and walked out. "Run away," Brandon shouted after me, laughing. "Go back to your little apartment, save up again. Maybe this time buy us a boat." I heard their laughter as I slammed the front door. I made it to my car before my legs gave out. I collapsed into the driver's seat, hyperventilating. The world was spinning. The violation felt physical, like I had been beaten. I fumbled for my phone and called Julia. They admitted it, I sobbed into the phone, unable to form full sentences. They bought a car. They called me greedy. My house. It's gone, Julia. It's all gone. Stay there, Julia commanded. Lock your doors. Do not talk to them again. I'm tracking your location. I'm on my way. 30 minutes later, Julia's SUV pulled up behind me. She didn't ask questions. She just opened my car door, unbuckled me, and guided me into her passenger seat. Her husband, Mike, hopped into my Honda to drive it back to the city. The ride back to Chicago was silent. I stared out the window, watching the cornfields blur into concrete and steel. I felt hollowed out. When I got home, I walked into my apartment. It felt different now. Before, it was a temporary sacrifice, a waiting room for my real life. Now, it was a cage. I looked at the peeling paint in the corner, the leaky faucet I hadn't bothered to fix because I was moving soon. I sat on my couch and stared at my laptop. One new message. It was from Diane, my real estate agent. Subject: Good news, Carissa. The sellers accepted the offer. They loved your letter. We need the earnest money by tomorrow at noon to lock it in. Let me know when the wire is sent. I burst into tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I had to type the hardest email of my life. Diane, I'm so sorry. My financial situation has changed unexpectedly. I have to withdraw my offer. I hit send and felt a piece of my soul die. Then, my phone rang. Caller ID. Mom. My heart stopped. Brandon had already gotten to them. I debated not answering, but I needed to know where I stood. I swiped right. Carissa? My dad's voice. He sounded stern. We just got off the phone with Tiffany. She's hysterical. Dad, I croaked. They stole... Stop it, he cut me off. Just stop. Tiffany told us everything. She said you guys had a disagreement about money and now you're threatening to call the police on Brandon. On family? They stole $87,000, Dad. They transferred it from my phone. Brandon said that was an investment return, Dad countered. He said you were confused, that you helped them out with a loan a while back and now you're demanding interest or something? I don't know the details, but Carissa, calling the cops, really? That's your sister. You don't ruin lives over money. It wasn't a loan, I screamed. The gaslighting making me dizzy. There was no investment. They bought a Cadillac and purses with my house money. Honey, my mom chimed in on the other line, her voice soothing but dismissive. You know how Brandon is with his big ideas. Maybe there was a miscommunication, but you have a good job. You're secure. They're struggling parents. Even if mistakes were made, can't you just let it go? For the sake of peace? We can't have the family torn apart. Let it go. Mistakes were made. They weren't denying it. They were minimizing it. They were asking me to eat a $87,000 loss, to keep the family comfortable, to keep the illusion alive. I can't believe this, I whispered. You're siding with the thieves. We're siding with family unity, Dad said firmly. If you pursue this legal nonsense, don't expect us to support you. You'll be the one tearing this family apart, not them. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, totally and completely alone. My money was gone. My house was gone. My parents had just disowned my reality. For a moment, I considered giving up. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should just start over. It would take another 5 years. I'd be 40. Then I looked at the empty spot on my wall where I had taped the floor plan of the brownstone. I remembered Brandon's sneer. Run away. Go back to your little apartment. I remembered Tiffany's bracelet. I remembered my dad's ultimatum. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. It replaced the sadness. It replaced the shock. I wasn't going to start over. I was going to finish this. There was a knock at the door. It was Julia. She walked in carrying a bottle of wine and a business card. She set the card on the table in front of me. Stephen Lewis, attorney at law, specializing in financial fraud and civil litigation. Drink the wine, Julia said, her eyes fierce. Then call him. We have a war to win. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Stephen Lewis. The building was glass and steel, cold and intimidating, exactly what I needed. I was done with warmth. I was done with family values. I needed a shark. Stephen was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my first car. He listened to my story without interrupting, his pen scratching rhythmically against a yellow legal pad. When I finished explaining the theft, the confrontation, and my parents' refusal to help, I braced myself for the same pitying look everyone else had given me. Instead, Stephen stopped writing and looked up. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice gravelly. "You have unauthorized access, digital wire fraud, grand larceny, and potentially identity theft. And the perpetrators admitted it to your face?" "Yes," I said. "But they claim it's a family matter. My parents are backing them." Stephen leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Ms. Wilson, half my career is built on family matters. The law doesn't care about DNA. The law cares about intent and action. If a stranger walked up to you on the street and forced you to transfer $87,000, that's robbery. Just because the robber sat at your dinner table doesn't make it a donation." He leaned forward. "But here is the hard truth. They will lie. They will say you authorized it. They will say it was a gift, a loan, or a reimbursement. Without hard proof that you didn't press that button, it's he said, she said." "They used my phone," I said, feeling my hope deflate. "It's my IP address, my device ID." "Then we need to prove who was holding the device," Stephen said. "We need a timeline. We need to destroy their alibi. Can you do that?" I thought about the weekend, the chaos, the isolation of the cabin. "I can try," I whispered. "Don't try," Stephen said, handing me a retainer agreement. "Hunt, if you want your life back, you have to stop thinking like a sister and start thinking like a prosecutor." I left his office with a mission. The sadness that had been drowning me began to recede, replaced by the icy clarity of a financial analyst. I deal in data, I deal in audit trails. If Brandon wanted to play games with numbers, he picked the wrong opponent. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment. I became a ghost. I ignored calls from my mother, 14 of them, and text messages from Tiffany, none. First, I called the bank's fraud investigation unit again. I didn't scream this time. I used their language. I requested the full metadata logs for the 3 transactions. "I need the exact timestamps down to the second," I told the agent. "And I need the geolocation data." When the report arrived via encrypted email, I printed it out and taped it to my living room wall. Transaction 1, Friday, 8:42 p.m. Transaction 2, Saturday, 2:15 p.m. Transaction 3, Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Now I had the when. I needed the woohoo. I closed my eyes, mentally replaying the weekend. Friday, 8:42 p.m. Where was I? I checked my photo gallery. At 8:40 p.m. on Friday, I had taken a picture of my dad grilling steaks. My phone was in my hand. My heart sank. Wait, I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, blurred but visible, was the kitchen clock. It read 7:40 p.m. Time zone change. Michigan is an hour ahead of Chicago. The bank records were in Central Time. That meant the transfer happened at 9:42 p.m. Michigan time. Where was I at 9:42 p.m.? I was washing dishes. I remembered because Mom had spilled the marinade. Brandon had my phone then. He said he needed to check an email. Saturday, 2:15 p.m. Central, 3:15 p.m. Michigan. I was hiking with my cousins. I didn't have my phone. I left it charging in the kitchen because the signal was weak in the woods. Brandon had stayed behind, claiming he had a migraine. Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Central, 10:30 a.m. Michigan. We were packing up. Brandon was loading the car. The timeline fit, but it was still circumstantial. I needed a smoking gun. I paced my apartment, staring at the wall. Think, Carissa, think. Then it hit me. The cabin. Last summer, after a break-in at the neighbor's property, my dad had installed a security system. A simple setup, a couple of Ring cameras monitoring the driveway and the front porch. My dad wasn't tech-savvy. When he bought them, he couldn't figure out the app, so I had set it up for him. I set it up, which meant my email was the recovery contact, and I knew the password because it was the same password he used for everything. Packers, 1985. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I navigated to the security camera login page. I typed in my dad's email and the password. Incorrect password. My heart stopped. Had they changed it? I tried again. Maybe he capitalized the P. Incorrect password. I sat back, defeated. Of course, Brandon probably told them to change it. He was thorough, but then I remembered. Dad didn't change passwords. He forgot them. I clicked forgot password. Send recovery code to backup email. Yes. A ping on my phone. The code arrived. I was in. I accessed the cloud storage. The system only kept footage for 30 days. The reunion was 5 days ago. It was still there. I scrolled to Friday night. 9:40 p.m. Michigan time. The camera view was high definition, pointed at the wide wooden porch. At 9:41 p.m., the screen door opened. Brandon walked out. He looked around, scanning the yard to make sure he was alone. The blue light of a screen illuminated his face. My phone. I recognized the pink case. He sat on the porch swing. He didn't look like a man checking an email. He looked like a man defusing a bomb. He was typing furiously. Then he stopped. He took a deep breath. He tapped the screen once. He smiled. It was a chilling, self-satisfied smirk that made my blood run cold. I checked the timestamp on the video. 9:42:15 p.m. I checked the bank log. Transaction 1 processed at 9:42:18 p.m. Got you. I felt a surge of adrenaline so strong I almost passed out. I downloaded the clip. I moved to Saturday. 3:15 p.m. The driveway camera. Everyone else was gone hiking. Brandon was walking around the side of the house. He was holding my phone again. He held it up to the sky, trying to get a better signal. He tapped. He waited. He pumped his fist in the air. Transaction 2 confirmed. I downloaded every second of footage. I had him. I had him dead to rights. This wasn't just he said, she said anymore. This was digital forensics. But I wasn't done. I went deeper. I looked at Brandon's social media. He had blocked me, but Julia had a fake account she used for investigative purposes, mostly checking up on ex-boyfriends. I logged in. 3 days before the reunion, Brandon had followed a page called Offshore LLC Setup. 2 days before the reunion, he posted a status. Big moves coming. Sometimes you have to take what's yours. I screenshotted everything. Then I did a credit check on myself. I wanted to make sure he hadn't opened credit cards in my name. The report was clean, thank God. But then I decided to run a public records search on Brandon. It cost $50, but it was worth every penny. The results were pathetic. 3 failed businesses in 4 years. A pending lawsuit from a landlord for unpaid rent on a commercial space. A lien on his previous car. He wasn't a businessman. He was a drowning man. And instead of learning to swim, he had decided to use me as a life raft. By Friday afternoon, my evidence wall was a masterpiece of incrimination. I had the bank logs, the camera footage, the timeline, the motive, his debts, and the outcome, the shopping spree. I called Stephen Lewis. I have the video, I said. I have him making the transfers on camera. There was a pause on the line. Ms. Wilson, Stephen said. And I could hear the smile in his voice. That is the nail in the coffin. Bring it in. We're filing the civil suit on Monday morning. And I'm going to call my contact at the district attorney's office. This just went from a lawsuit to a criminal investigation. I hung up and sat in my silent apartment. I should have felt triumphant. I had the weapon to destroy them. But then my gaze drifted to a photo on my mantle. It was from 10 years ago. Me, Tiffany, Mom, and Dad at my college graduation. We looked so happy. We were a unit. If I pulled this trigger, that unit was dead forever. My parents would never forgive me for sending their son-in-law to prison. Tiffany would hate me. I would be an orphan in every way that mattered. I picked up the photo. I remembered what Brandon said. Who do you think they'll believe? He counted on my fear. He counted on my love for my family being stronger than my self-respect. For 34 years, I had played the role of the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who absorbed the pain so everyone else could be comfortable. I walked to the kitchen and dropped the photo frame into the trash can. Glass shattered. Not anymore, I said to the empty room. I wasn't just going to sue them. I was going to ambush them. They thought I was cowed. They thought I was crying in my apartment, accepting my defeat. They had no idea that I was about to blow up their entire world. I picked up my phone and sent a text to the family group chat, the one I hadn't spoken in for a week. Me. Mom, Dad, Tiffany, Brandon. I've done a lot of thinking. You're right. Family is the most important thing. I want to put this behind us. 3 dots appeared instantly. Mom. Oh, honey. I knew you'd come around. I'm so proud of you, Dad. Good decision, Carissa. Proud of you, Brandon. Glad you finally see sense. Let's move forward. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed the next part carefully. Me. I want to apologize properly. Can you all meet me at Tiffany and Brandon's house tomorrow at 11 a.m.? I want to clear the air and discuss how we can fix this. Tiffany. Yes, we'll be there. I miss you, sis. I stared at the screen, a cold smile touching my lips. I miss you too, sis. I wasn't going there to apologize. I was bringing the police. I was bringing the bank fraud investigator. I was bringing my lawyer. And I was bringing my parents so they could watch the handcuffs go on. It was time for the reunion they would never forget. Saturday morning felt electric. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain, but I didn't care. I was dressed in a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers, armor for the modern woman. In my passenger seat sat a heavy leather tote bag. Inside wasn't an apology gift. It contained 3 flash drives, a stack of affidavits, and a printout of a forensic timeline that would send my brother-in-law to prison. I pulled up to Brandon and Tiffany's house at 10:55 a.m. My parents' car was already in the driveway, parked next to that glossy black Escalade. Seeing my parents' sedan there, innocent and unassuming next to the vehicle bought with my stolen future, made my blood boil. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I walked to the door and didn't bother knocking. I just walked in. The scene inside was nauseatingly wholesome. My mom was sitting on the couch, holding a mug of coffee. My dad was inspecting the new 65-inch TV, clearly impressed. Tiffany was beaming, looking relieved that the unpleasantness was over. And Brandon. Brandon was leaning against the mantelpiece, looking like the lord of the manor. There she is, Mom cried out, jumping up to hug me. Oh, Carissa, I'm so glad you're here. I knew you'd do the right thing. I stiffened in her embrace but didn't pull away. Hi, Mom, Dad patted me on the back. Proud of you, kiddo. Takes a big person to admit when they've overreacted. Family comes first. I looked at Brandon. He smirked, taking a sip from his mug. Water under the bridge, Carissa. We're just glad you came to your senses. I know it was probably hard for you to accept that we're doing well now, but jealousy is a natural emotion. Jealousy. The audacity was breathtaking. I actually have something I want to say to everyone, I said, my voice steady. But I think it's better if we all sit down. Brandon gestured to the armchairs expansively. Please, make yourself at home. I remained standing. I walked over to the coffee table and set my leather bag down with a heavy thud. I told you yesterday that I did a lot of thinking, I began, looking from my parents to Tiffany, and I realized that secrets are what destroy families. So I want to put everything on the table. No more lies. Exactly, Mom nodded vigorously. Honesty is key. I agree, I said. Which is why I invited a few other people to join us. Brandon frowned. The mug paused halfway to his mouth. Other people? Who? Right on cue, a heavy, authoritative pounding echoed from the front door. Bam, bam, bam. The room went dead silent. Tiffany jumped. Brandon's eyes darted to the window. Who is that? Dad asked, confused. I didn't answer. I walked to the door and threw it open. 2 uniformed police officers stood on the porch. Behind them was Stephen Lewis, looking sharp in his gray suit, and Diana Martinez from the bank's fraud division. Brandon Wilson, one of the officers, barked, stepping into the foyer. Brandon dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, splashing hot liquid over his expensive new sneakers. Yes? We have a warrant for your arrest, the officer stated, his voice filling the room. Charges include wire fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft. What? Mom screamed, dropping back onto the couch. What is going on? You can't come in here, Brandon yelled, backing away. This is a mistake. Carissa, tell them to leave. Stephen stepped forward, bypassing Brandon and handing a thick envelope to my father. Mr. Wilson, Stephen said calmly, I am Carissa's attorney. These are copies of the civil lawsuit we filed this morning. We are suing Brandon and Tiffany for the return of $87,000 plus damages. Lawsuit, Dad looked at the papers, his hands shaking. Carissa, what have you done? I did what you told me to do, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. I stopped overreacting and I started dealing with facts. I walked over to the giant TV. Brandon told you the money was from an investment, right? I asked the room. Yes, Tiffany cried, tears streaming down her face. It was. Tell them, Brandon. It's all a misunderstanding, Brandon stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. My lawyer will clear this up. Let's see the investment strategy, I said. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and plugged it into the side of the TV. I grabbed the remote. This is the security footage from the cabin, Friday night. The screen flickered to life. The room went silent, save for the police officers moving to flank Brandon. On the screen, Brandon walked onto the porch. The date and time were clearly visible. He looked around furtively. He pulled out my phone, identifiable by its bright pink case. We watched him type. We watched him pause. We watched him smirk, that same arrogant smirk he had worn just minutes ago. This was at 9:42 p.m., I narrated coldly. At 9:42 p.m., exactly, $29,000 left my account. He wasn't checking email, Mom. He was robbing me. I fast-forwarded. Saturday afternoon. Brandon holding my phone up to the sky. Transfer number 2, I said. I turned off the TV and faced my parents. They looked pale, like the blood had been drained from their bodies. My father stared at Brandon with a look of dawning horror. You said, Dad's voice cracked. You said you sold a stake in a tech startup. I did, Brandon lied, though his voice was an octave too high. That video proves nothing. I was playing a game on her phone. With my banking app open, I countered. Diana Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, we traced the receiving accounts. They are shell accounts opened in your name 3 days prior to the theft. The IP addresses matched the device in the video. The money was then used to purchase this vehicle, she pointed out the window, and roughly $15,000 in luxury goods found in this home. The officer stepped forward. Brandon Wilson, turn around and place your hands behind your back. No, Brandon shouted. He looked at Tiffany. Tiff, do something. Tell them I had permission. All eyes turned to Tiffany. She was curled in the corner of the sofa, sobbing into her hands. Tiffany, I asked softly, did I give him permission? She looked up. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. She looked at Brandon, then at the police, then at me. He told me, she choked out. He told me you wouldn't mind. He said you had plenty. That is not permission, the officer snapped. He grabbed Brandon's wrist. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest noise I had ever heard. You're making a mistake, Brandon screamed as they hauled him toward the door. Carissa, you witch. You ruined this family. Mom, Dad. Don't let them take me. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, burying her face in my father's shoulder. My father just stood there, staring at the empty doorway where his son-in-law had just been dragged out. The front door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Stephen cleared his throat. We will be petitioning the court to freeze all assets, including the vehicle and the bank accounts. We'll need to catalog the items in the house to see what was purchased with stolen funds. Diana nodded. I'll begin the paperwork. They stepped outside to give us a moment. I stood alone in the center of the room. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel joy. But I felt clean. The gaslighting was over. The truth was out. My father slowly sat down on the coffee table, putting his head in his hands. He stole it, Dad whispered, as if saying it aloud made it real. He actually stole it. And you helped him cover it up, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Dad looked up, his eyes red. We didn't know Carissa. We believed him. He's family. So am I said, my voice trembling slightly. But you didn't believe me. You chose the lie because it was easier. You chose the peace. I looked at Tiffany. She hadn't moved. And you, I said to my sister, you watched him do it. You spent the money. You wore the bracelet. I was scared, Tiffany wailed. He said he'd leave me if I didn't support him. He said we needed the money to be happy. Well, I said, picking up my leather bag. I hope the bracelet was worth it. I turned to the door. Where are you going? Mom cried out. Carissa, you can't leave us like this. I have a meeting with the district attorney, I said, opening the door. And then I'm going to go to my apartment, drink a glass of cheap wine, and sleep for the first time in a week. I paused at the threshold and looked back at the wreckage of my family. You guys wanted me to figure it out, I said. I figured it out. I walked out to my paid-off Honda. As I started the engine, I saw the police car pulling away with Brandon in the back seat. I didn't wave. I just put the car in drive and didn't look back. The silence that follows a siren is the loudest silence in the world. For the first 48 hours after Brandon's arrest, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't turn on the TV. I barely ate. I just sat on my floor, surrounded by legal pads and bank statements, trying to process the explosion I had just detonated in the middle of my family. My phone, however, was not silent. It vibrated incessantly on the coffee table. 15 missed calls from Mom, 8 missed calls from Dad, 3 missed calls from Tiffany, 1 voicemail from an unknown number, probably a reporter. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready to hear their excuses, their apologies, or their accusations. I needed to let the dust settle. On Tuesday morning, I finally put on real clothes and went to court for the arraignment. Stephen met me outside the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. "How are you holding up?" he asked, scanning my face for cracks. "I'm still standing," I said grimly. "Good. Because this part gets ugly. Brandon pled not guilty this morning." I stopped walking. "Not guilty? We have him on video." "It's standard procedure," Stephen assured me. "He's hoping for a plea deal. He's scared. But here is the good news. The judge granted our motion for an emergency asset freeze. The Cadillac, the bank accounts, the contents of the house, it's all locked down. He can't spend another dime of your money." We walked inside. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and despair. When they brought Brandon out, he was wearing an orange jumpsuit. It clashed horribly with his skin tone. A petty observation that gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. He looked smaller without his designer clothes. He looked tired. When he saw me in the gallery, his eyes narrowed. He muttered something to his public defender, who shook his head sharply. The judge set bail at $50,000. Brandon looked at the gallery, searching for Tiffany or my parents to bail him out. They weren't there. I was the only family member who had shown up. Not to support him, but to witness him. As the bailiff led him away, Brandon shouted, "This isn't over, Carissa. You'll regret this." The judge banged his gavel. "One more outburst, Mr. Wilson, and I'll hold you in contempt." I walked out of the courthouse and felt the sun on my face. Step 1 complete. Later that afternoon, I finally answered my phone. It was my father. "Carissa," his voice was hoarse. He sounded like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. Can we come over?" "No," I said instantly. "I'm not ready for company." "Please," he begged. We need to understand. We need to talk about Tiffany." "What about her?" "She's a mess, Carissa. The police questioned her for 6 hours. They're threatening to charge her as an accomplice if she doesn't testify against Brandon. She's terrified. She's pregnant." The world stopped spinning. "What?" I whispered. "She found out the morning of the arrest," Dad said quietly. "She was going to tell everyone at the reconciliation meeting. That's why she wanted the money, Carissa. That's why she was so desperate. She wanted a nursery. She wanted a life for the baby." I sank onto my couch, the phone slipping in my hand. Pregnant. A baby. My niece or nephew. A child whose college fund was currently being worn on Brandon's wrist or parked in an impound lot. "That doesn't change what they did," I said, though my voice wavered. "It makes it worse. They brought a child into a crime scene." "I know," Dad sighed. "I know. We aren't asking you to drop the charges. We know we can't ask that anymore. We want you to know that we're sorry. We failed you. We should have listened." It was the apology I had wanted for a week. But now that I had it, it tasted like ash. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, "but I need space. If Tiffany wants to talk to me, she can call me herself. But tell her one thing. If she lies to the police to protect Brandon, I will not save her. I can't save her." I hung up and stared at the wall. The baby changed the equation. It didn't change the legal reality, but it changed the emotional landscape. Brandon wasn't just my thief brother-in-law anymore. He was the father of the next generation of our family, and I had just put him in a cage. That evening, a knock at my door startled me. I checked the peephole. It wasn't my parents. It was Tiffany. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were swollen shut. Her hair was unwashed, and she was wearing sweatpants that looked too big for her. She looked like a ghost of the glamorous woman who had been unboxing Hermes bags 3 days ago. I opened the door. I didn't think you'd open it, she whispered. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She walked in and stood awkwardly in the middle of my small living room, the room she had mocked for being sad and lonely. Is it true? I asked. Are you pregnant? She nodded, tears spilling over instantly. 6 weeks. I took the test the morning you came over with the police. And Brandon knows? He knows. That's why he was so angry. He kept saying he was doing it for us, for the family. He did it for himself, Tiffany, I said sharply. He bought a Cadillac. He didn't buy a crib. He didn't start a college fund. He bought toys for himself to look rich. She flinched. I know, I see that now. The police, they showed me the records. He spent $40,000 on the car and the rest on clothes and electronics. There was nothing set aside for the baby. She collapsed onto my sofa, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Carissa. I'm so sorry. I was jealous. You always had everything together. Mom and Dad always bragged about you to their friends. Carissa, the analyst. Carissa, the homeowner. I felt like a failure. Brandon made me feel like I deserved to take a shortcut. I sat down next to her, keeping a careful distance. Jealousy isn't a crime, Tiff. Stealing is. You watched him take my future. You helped him spend it. I know, she sobbed. I'm going to testify. I told the DA everything. I gave them his passwords. I gave them the offshore account details he wrote down in his notebook. I'm turning on him, Carissa. I'm choosing the baby. I'm choosing you. I looked at my little sister. She was weak, she was flawed, and she had hurt me more than anyone else on earth. But she was finally breaking the cycle. She was finally choosing reality over Brandon's fantasy. Good, I said softly. That's the first smart decision you've made in years. Will you ever forgive me? She asked, looking up with pleading eyes. I thought about the house I lost. I thought about the humiliation of my parents siding against me. Not today, I said honestly, and probably not tomorrow. Trust is like a mirror, Tiff. Once it's broken, you can glue it back together, but you can still see the cracks. She nodded, accepting the verdict. But, I added, handing her a tissue, I won't let you go through this pregnancy alone. I'm still your sister. Even if I don't like you very much right now. She managed a weak, watery smile. The next few weeks were a blur of legal bureaucracy. With Tiffany's testimony and the video evidence, Brandon's defense crumbled. The misunderstanding narrative evaporated. My parents, to their credit, stepped up. They stopped enabling. They refused to bail Brandon out. They hired a separate lawyer for Tiffany to ensure she didn't get dragged down with him. They started therapy, family therapy, though I refused to join the sessions for the first month. Diane, my real estate agent, called me 2 weeks later. The sellers of the brownstone reached out, she said. They heard what happened. It's a small neighborhood. News travels. They were horrified. That's nice of them, I said, feeling a pang of loss. But without the money, it doesn't matter. Well, Diane hesitated. They haven't accepted another offer yet. They said, if you can get the funds back within 60 days, they'll hold it for you. My heart leaped. 60 days. I called Stephen. How fast can we get the restitution? The asset seizure is moving fast, Stephen said. We're auctioning the Escalade next week. We're liquidating the luxury goods. We've recovered about $15,000 in cash from the accounts, but getting the full $87,000. It's going to take time, Carissa. Probably 6 months minimum. My heart sank again. 6 months was too long. The house would be gone. Is there any other way? I asked. Unless Brandon has a hidden stash of gold bars, Stephen quipped. No, we have to wait for the legal gears to turn. I hung up, resigned to losing the house. But then, my phone rang. It was my dad. Carissa, he said, sounding clearer than he had in weeks. Your mother and I had a long talk. We looked at our retirement accounts. We looked at the money we wasted on Tiffany's wedding. We looked at the mess we helped create. Dad, don't, I said. We can't give you the full amount, he continued, ignoring me. But we can give you a bridge loan, $50,000, interest-free. You pay us back when the court gets your money from Brandon. I can't take your retirement money, I said instinctively. The independent part of me recoiled. You aren't taking it, Dad said firmly. You're letting us fix our mistake. We enabled the thief. Now let us help the victim. Please, Carissa, let us do this one right thing. I sat in my apartment, looking at the peeling paint. I thought about pride. Pride had kept me isolated. Pride had made me stubborn. But justice wasn't just about punishing the bad guys. It was about making the victim whole. Okay, I whispered, tears finally falling. Okay, Dad, thank you. The fight wasn't over. Brandon was still awaiting trial. Tiffany was facing a terrifying future as a single mother. My relationship with my family was fragile and scarred. But as I called Diane back to tell her the deal was back on, I realized something important. I had lost my innocence. I had lost my blind trust. But I was getting my house. And this time, I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. 3 months. That's how long it took for the wheels of justice to grind their way to the Cook County Courthouse. In those 3 months, my life had bifurcated. On paper, I was winning. Thanks to my parents' bridge loan, I had closed on the brownstone. I spent my weekends stripping old wallpaper and refinishing the original hardwood floors. The physical labor a welcome distraction from the mental exhaustion. I was living in my dream home, but it felt like I was house-sitting for a ghost. I couldn't fully exhale, not while Brandon was still out on bail, which his parents had eventually posted. Walking free, breathing the same air, and likely plotting his next con. The trial date was set for a rainy Tuesday in November. I arrived early. My parents were already there, sitting on a wooden bench outside the courtroom. They looked like statues of grief. My mother, usually vibrant and chatty, was staring at her hands. My father was reading a newspaper, but I hadn't seen him turn a page in 10 minutes. Tiffany arrived last. She was 5 months pregnant, now a small bump visible under her oversized coat. She looked healthier than she had the night she came to my apartment, but her eyes were darting around nervously, terrified of running into Brandon in the hallway. He's not here yet, I told her, reading her mind. Come sit by us. She sat between me and Mom. We were a phalanx of Wilson women, united by blood and betrayal. When Brandon finally appeared, he wasn't the cocky man in the Escalade, nor was he the defeated man in the orange jumpsuit. He was something in between, desperate. He was wearing a suit that used to fit him perfectly, but now hung loose on his frame. He walked with a frantic energy, his eyes scanning the hallway until they landed on us. He started walking toward us. Tiffany, he called out, ignoring the rest of us. Tiff, baby, please, you can't do this. My father stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't make a fist. He just stepped in front of Tiffany, blocking Brandon's view. You do not speak to her, Dad said. His voice was low, vibrating with a quiet menace I had never heard before. You do not look at her. You walk into that courtroom and you face what you did. Brandon's lawyer, a harried-looking public defender, grabbed Brandon's elbow and steered him away. Mr. Wilson, stop. We talked about this. No contact. We filed into the courtroom. The air was heavy, smelling of old wood and stale anxiety. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Kincaid, had warned me that the defense's strategy would be to paint this as a family dispute gone wrong, a civil matter, not a criminal one. They were going to try to prove that I had implicitly authorized the transfer, or at least that the boundaries were blurry. The trial began. Ms. Kincaid was clinical. She laid out the timeline. She showed the bank logs. She played the video of Brandon on the porch. The jury, 12 strangers who held my future in their hands, watched the screen. I saw a grandmother in the front row shake her head as she watched Brandon smirk on the porch swing. Good, I thought. See him. Then it was my turn to take the stand. I walked to the witness box, swore on the Bible, and sat down. I refused to look at Brandon. I looked straight at the jury. Miss Kincaid asked me about the savings. I saved for 5 years, I stated clearly. 30% of every paycheck. It was an automated transfer. I never touched it. And did you ever at any point offer this money to the defendant? No. Did you offer it as a loan? No. Did you offer it as an investment? No. Brandon Wilson has never successfully invested anything in his life. Objection from the defense. Sustained. But the point landed. Then Brandon's lawyer stood up. He was doing his job, but I hated him for it. Ms. Wilson, he began, pacing in front of me. You're a successful woman, single, no dependents, is that correct? Yes. And your sister, she struggles financially, doesn't she? She did, yes. And you've helped her before. You paid an electric bill. You bought groceries? Isn't it true that you have a pattern of financial generosity toward your sister? I have a pattern of preventing my sister from being homeless, I corrected him. That is not the same as handing her $87,000 to buy a luxury SUV. But isn't it possible, the lawyer pressed, that in the spirit of the family reunion, caught up in the emotion of the moment, you told Mr. Wilson he could use what he needed to get back on his feet? And that you only cried theft when you saw how he spent it? I leaned into the microphone. I felt cold steel in my spine. I am a financial analyst. I don't make vague offers. I deal in contracts. I deal in paper trails. If I had loaned him that money, there would be a signed promissory note. There wasn't one because he stole it while I was washing his dishes. The lawyer paused. He knew he was losing. No further questions. Then came the star witness. The prosecution calls Tiffany Wilson. The courtroom went silent. Brandon sat up straight, his eyes boring into Tiffany as she waddled to the stand. He was trying to intimidate her, trying to remind her of the bond they used to share. Tiffany took the oath. She looked terrified, but she didn't look at Brandon. She looked at our parents in the front row. Mom gave her a small, encouraging nod. Mrs. Wilson, the prosecutor asked, did you know about the transfers? Not at first, Tiffany said, her voice shaking. Not until Saturday. I saw the alert on his phone. I asked him where the money came from. And what did he say? Tiffany took a deep breath. He said, Carissa won't miss it. She's hoarding it. We deserve a turn. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. He said we deserve a turn? The prosecutor repeated. Yes, Tiffany wept. He said I was the favorite, so Mom and Dad would forgive us. He said Carissa was too desperate for family approval to press charges. He called her a doormat. I stared at my hands. A doormat. It hurt because it had been true. For years it had been true. And why did you go along with it? Because I was pregnant, Tiffany whispered. And because I was weak. I let him convince me that his theft was actually justice. I wanted the fairy tale he promised me. She looked directly at Brandon then. But it wasn't a fairy tale, it was a felony. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. You liar, you begged me for that car. Order, the judge shouted. Mr. Wilson, sit down, Brandon was panting, his face red. The mask had slipped completely. The jury wasn't seeing a misunderstood entrepreneur. They were seeing a volatile, greedy narcissist. Closing arguments were brief. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. We find the defendant, Brandon James Wilson, guilty on all counts. Guilty. Wire fraud. Guilty. Grand larceny. Guilty. Identity theft. I didn't cheer. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since August. My mom squeezed my hand so hard her knuckles turned white. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. At the sentencing, the judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at Brandon with disdain. Mr. Wilson, she said, financial crimes are often called bloodless. But I disagree. You didn't just take money. You extracted 5 years of this woman's labor. You exploited family trust. You tried to pit a sister against a sister. You showed no remorse when confronted. In fact, you doubled down and attempted blackmail. She looked at her papers. The guidelines suggest probation for a first offense, but given the magnitude of the betrayal and the premeditated nature of the crime, I am stepping outside those guidelines. Brandon's face went pale. I sentence you to 48 months in state prison, the judge declared. You will serve a minimum of 2 years before being eligible for parole. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $87,000 to the victim, Carissa Wilson, along with court costs. 4 years. Brandon looked like he had been punched in the gut. He turned to the gallery. Mom, Dad, do something. He wasn't talking to his parents. He was talking to mine. My father just stared at him, stone-faced. Goodbye, Brandon. The bailiffs moved in. They handcuffed him. Real handcuffs this time, not for show. They led him out the side door. He didn't look like a charming businessman anymore. He looked like exactly what he was, a convict. We walked out of the courtroom into the crisp Chicago afternoon. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet pavement and exhaust fumes, but to me, it smelled like freedom. "It's over," Tiffany whispered, rubbing her stomach. "He's gone," Mom said, wiping her eyes. "He can't hurt us anymore." I looked at my family. We were battered. We were bruised. My parents' retirement was dented. Tiffany was facing single motherhood at 29. I was $50,000 in debt to my parents. But Brandon was gone. The tumor had been excised. "I'm hungry," Dad announced suddenly, breaking the somber mood. "Who wants deep dish?" I laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound, but it was a laugh. "I do," I said, "but I'm buying, with my own credit card." We walked toward the parking garage. The nightmare was legally over. But as anyone who has survived a trauma knows, the court case is just the surgery. Now came the physical therapy. Now came the healing. And the first step of healing was accepting that while I had my house back, I still had to make it a home. And I had to figure out how to be a sister to the woman who had helped rob me. Winning a lawsuit feels a lot like surviving a car crash. You walk away, you're alive, but you hurt in places you didn't know existed. And just because the other driver is in jail, doesn't mean your car isn't totaled. The first check from the state of Illinois arrived 3 weeks after Brandon was processed into the correctional facility in Joliet. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, expecting a significant chunk of my life back. Inside was a check for $42,500. It was the proceeds from the auction of the black Cadillac Escalade, minus the auctioneer's fees and administrative costs. The car they had bought for nearly $60,000, using my money, had depreciated the moment they drove it off the lot. The stupid tax, as Stephen called it. I deposited the check and immediately wired $40,000 of it to my parents. "Keep it," my dad had told me on the phone. "Pay us back when you can." "No," I insisted. "I don't want to owe anyone, not anymore." I kept $2,500 to buy a refrigerator for the new house. The rest of the debt, the remaining $10,000 I owed my parents, and the $34,500 gap between what was stolen and what was recovered, was a hole I had to fill myself. I moved into the brownstone in late November. It wasn't the triumphant entry I had imagined for 5 years. There was no champagne popping, no housewarming party with music blasting. It was just me, Julia, and a U-Haul truck on a gray Saturday. The house was beautiful, high ceilings, crown molding, a fireplace that actually worked. But it was empty. I couldn't afford furniture. I slept on a mattress on the floor of the master bedroom. My living room contained a single folding chair and a lamp. "It's minimalist chic," Julia joked, trying to lighten the mood as we ate pizza on the floor. "It's crime scene chic," I corrected her, though I managed a smile. But strange things happen when you strip a life down to the studs. You find out what actually holds the roof up. I spent my evenings stripping layers of old wallpaper in the hallway. It was grueling, repetitive work. Scrape, peel, sand. Scrape, peel, sand. It became my therapy. With every strip of ugly yellowed paper I removed, I felt like I was scraping away the victimhood. I wasn't the girl who got robbed anymore. I was the woman who owned this wall. I was the woman who was revealing the original plaster beneath. Then came the baby. In January, amidst a brutal Chicago snowstorm, Tiffany went into labor. I was at work when my mom called. "It's time," she said, her voice high with panic. "We're at Northwestern. She's asking for you." I hesitated. My hand hovered over my mouse. I had a report due. I had a meeting at 2 p.m. I had a sister who had watched her husband loot my bank account. "Carissa?" Mom pleaded. "Please," I sighed, grabbing my coat. "I'm on my way." When I walked into the delivery room, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and sweat. Tiffany looked small in the hospital bed. She was pale, her hair plastered to her forehead. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "You came," she sobbed. "I came," I said, standing near the door. "Don't read too much into it. Labor is a great equalizer. It doesn't care about lawsuits or grudges. For the next 6 hours, I wasn't the plaintiff and she wasn't the witness. I was just the hand she squeezed when the contractions hit. I was the one feeding her ice chips when the baby finally arrived. A squalling, red-faced boy with a full head of dark hair. The room went silent. The nurse placed him on Tiffany's chest. Tiffany looked down at him with a look of pure, terrified love. "Leo," she whispered. "His name is Leo." She looked up at me. "Do you want to hold him?" I froze. I looked at the baby. He was half Brandon. He carried the DNA of a man who had sneered at me in a courtroom. A man who was currently sitting in a cell wearing a uniform number. But then Leo opened his eyes. They weren't Brandon's eyes. They were dark and curious. They were innocent. He hadn't stolen anything. He was just a blank slate, arriving in the middle of a war he didn't start. "Okay," I said. I took him in my arms. He was warm and heavy. He grasped my finger with a tiny, strong hand. And just like that, the ice in my chest cracked a little more. "Hi, Leo," I whispered. "I'm your Aunt Carissa. I'm the one with the good credit score. Stick with me." Tiffany laughed, a tired, breathless sound. "He's lucky to have you." "He is," I said, looking at her seriously. "And he's going to need more than luck. He's going to need a mother who isn't dependent on a con artist." "I know," Tiffany said, her expression hardening. "I'm done being that person, Carissa. I promise." Promising is easy. Doing is hard. The real work began a month later in the office of Dr. Eris, a family therapist my parents had begged us to see. The first session was a disaster. I sat on one end of the couch, Tiffany on the other. My parents sat in armchairs, looking like referees. "So," Dr. Eris said, looking at us over his spectacles, "let's talk about money. In this family, money seems to be a language. What is it saying?" "It says Carissa is perfect," Tiffany blurted out. I turned to her, shocked. "Excuse me?" "It's true," Tiffany cried, her face flushing. Growing up, it was always Carissa saved her allowance. Carissa got a scholarship. Carissa bought a car. You were the benchmark I could never reach. So I stopped trying. I figured if I couldn't be the smart one, I'd be the fun one, the pretty one. And then Brandon came along and he told me I didn't have to compete. He told me I deserved things just because I was me. "So you stole from me because you were insecure?" I asked, my voice rising. "You let him rob me because you wanted a participation trophy?" "I wanted to feel powerful," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Just for once, I wanted to be the one who could buy things. I wanted to be the one taking the family to Disney World. I hated that you were always the savior. I hated that I needed you." The room fell silent. It was the ugliest, most honest thing she had ever said. "I didn't want to be the savior," I said quietly. "I wanted to be the sister, but I couldn't be, because I was too busy being the safety net. Do you know how tiring it is, Tiffany? To always be the responsible one. To never get to be the fun one, because if I screw up, there's no one to catch me." I looked at my parents. "You guys created this," I told them. "You let her be the child and made me the parent. You bailed her out every time, so she never learned to walk. And you praised me for being independent, so I never learned to ask for help." Mom started to cry. "We thought we were helping. You were feeding the monster," I said. "And the monster ate my house." That session didn't fix us, but it diagnosed the disease. Over the next few months, we kept going. It was painful. It was like resetting a bone that had healed wrong. We had to break it again to fix it. Tiffany moved in with Mom and Dad, but this time, the rules were different. I drafted a lease agreement for her. "You pay rent," I told her, sliding the paper across the table. "It's nominal, $300 a month, but you pay it. You buy your own groceries. You pay for your own diapers." "I don't have a job," Tiffany said, looking at the paper. "Then get one," I said. "Leo needs a role model, not a dependent." 2 weeks later, Tiffany got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It wasn't glamorous. It paid slightly above minimum wage. But the day she showed me her first paycheck, she looked prouder than she had when she was flashing that stolen diamond bracelet. "I bought Leo's formula," she told me, "with my own money." "Good," I said. "Keep going." Meanwhile, the restitution from Brandon was a joke. In prison, Brandon was working in the laundry. He earned about 40 cents an hour. Every month, I received a check from the Department of Corrections. $12.43 for $11.80. At this rate, he would pay me back in roughly 600 years. I taped the first check of $12.43 to my refrigerator. Julia came over for wine one night and saw it. "Is that a trophy?" she asked. "It's a reminder," I said. "That justice isn't about the money. He's folding sheets for 12 hours a day to send me the price of a sandwich. That's justice." But the financial hole was still there. I was working extra hours, taking on freelance consulting gigs on weekends to rebuild my savings. My house was coming together slowly. I bought a sofa, secondhand but nice. I painted the kitchen. One afternoon in May, I was in my garden, my actual garden, planting hydrangeas. The soil was cool and dark in my hands. Tiffany pulled up in her old car, the Escalade long gone. She had Leo in a carrier. She walked around the back gate. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I wiped my hands on my jeans. "I brought you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "It's not much," she said. "But I sold the jewelry, the stuff Brandon gave me before the theft. The engagement ring, which turned out to be cubic zirconia, the necklaces, the bracelet." She handed me the envelope. Inside was $1,500 in cash. And this, she handed me a check. It was for $300. "It's my first installment," she said. "I know the court didn't order me to pay restitution because I testified. But I want to. I want to pay back half. It might take me the rest of my life, Carissa. But I'm going to pay for my half of the car." I looked at the check. It was the first time in her life Tiffany had given me money. I looked at her. She looked tired. She had spit up on her shoulder. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She was a mother trying to clean up a mess. "Thank you," I said. I didn't refuse it. Refusing it would have been an insult. Taking it was an act of respect. "I'll apply this to the principal." She sat down on the grass next to me. Leo was asleep in his carrier. "Does it ever go away?" she asked, looking at the house. "The anger?" I dug my trowel into the earth. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't think it disappears. I think you just grow around it. Like a tree growing around a fence wire. The wire is still there, but the tree keeps getting bigger." She nodded. "I visited Brandon yesterday." I stopped digging. "You did?" "Yeah, I took Leo. I thought I needed to see him. And? He looks awful," she said. "He's angry. He blames everyone but himself. He asked me to smuggle him in cigarettes. He didn't even ask about the baby." She picked at a blade of grass. I left after 10 minutes. And I realized something. I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was. But that person never existed. "No," I said. "He didn't." "I filed the divorce papers this morning," she added softly. I put down my trowel and looked at my sister. "You really are doing it," I said. "You're really growing up." "I have to," she looked at Leo. "I don't want him to be a Wilson who steals. I want him to be a Wilson who builds." I smiled. It was genuine this time. "Well," I said, pointing to the flat of flowers, "if you want to build, grab a shovel. These hydrangeas aren't going to plant themselves." She laughed, kicked off her sandals, and grabbed a spade. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the dirt, sweating, working, and planting roots in the ground of the home that almost wasn't mine. We weren't fixed. We weren't back to normal. Normal was gone. But as I watched my sister soothe her crying son, and as I looked at the sturdy brick walls of my house, I realized we were something better than normal. We were real, and for the first time in a long time, I felt rich. Not because of the money, I was still broke, but because I knew exactly what I could survive. They say time heals all wounds, but they don't tell you that the scar tissue can be stiffer than the original skin. 8 months had passed since the sentencing. My life had settled into a rhythm that looked, from the outside, like the American dream I had originally planned. My brownstone was 80% finished. I had been promoted to senior analyst at Meridian Partners. I had a garden that was the envy of the block. But I was different. I was hyper-vigilant. I checked my bank balances every morning at 6 a.m., a ritual as ingrained as brushing my teeth. I had 3 different locks on my front door. I shredded every piece of mail that had my name on it. And then there was Mark. Mark was the contractor I had hired to redo the kitchen cabinetry, a job too big for my DIY skills. He was 40, with calloused hands, sawdust in his hair, and a smile that reached his eyes. He was the opposite of Brandon. Brandon was polished veneer. Mark was solid oak. "You know," Mark said one Tuesday, wiping grease off his hands as he packed up his tools, "I finished the cabinets 3 days ago. Today I just fixed a squeaky hinge you didn't even ask about. I looked up from my laptop at the kitchen island. I appreciate the attention to detail. He leaned against the counter. I'm trying to say, Carissa, that I'm running out of excuses to come over here. Maybe I could just come over for dinner without the tool belt. My stomach tightened. My instinct, the new protective instinct forged in the fire of betrayal, screamed, no. Men want something. Men lie. Men look at your savings account and see a target. I'm not really dating right now, I stammered, retreating behind my laptop screen. Work is crazy. The house is a mess. Mark's smile didn't fade, but it turned gentle. He looked around the pristine, renovated kitchen. The house is perfect, Carissa, but I get it. The walls are high. Just let me know if you ever want to install a gate. He left, and I felt a pang of regret so sharp it almost brought me to tears. I wanted to say yes. But Brandon hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my ability to believe that someone could want me for me, and not for what I could provide. The next day, the letter arrived. It was in a plain white envelope with a stamp from the Illinois Department of Corrections. Inmate, Wilson, Brandon. ID. R445029. My hands shook as I held it over the shredder. I should destroy it. I shouldn't give him the satisfaction, but curiosity is a poison. I needed to know. I slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. Carissa, I know you hate me. I get it. But prison changes a man. I've been thinking a lot. About family, about what I took. I can't pay you back $87,000 on laundry wages. We both know that. But I have a way to make a dent. Before everything went down, I stashed about $15,000 in cash. Emergency fund. It's not in a bank. The feds didn't find it. The lawyers don't know about it. I'm willing to tell you where it is. I want you to have it. It's for the house. It's for Leo. But I need a favor. I need you to talk to Tiffany. She's blocked my calls. She won't bring my son to see me. If you can get her to bring Leo for one visit, just 1 hour, I'll give you the location of the cash. Think about it. It's your money anyway. Just come. Get it. Brandon, I stared at the paper. $15,000. That would pay off the rest of the debt to my parents. It would finish the house, but it felt like a trap. It felt like bait. I drove straight to Tiffany's apartment. She was living in a small 2-bedroom walk-up now, paying her rent, mostly, on time. When I walked in, Leo was doing tummy time on a colorful mat. He was sitting up now, babbling, oblivious to the fact that his father was trying to trade him for cash. Did you get a letter? I asked without preamble. Tiffany looked up from folding laundry. Her face went pale. You too? He says he has $15,000 hidden, I said, tossing the letter on her table. He says he'll tell me where it is if you bring Leo to prison. Tiffany let out a bitter laugh. She walked to her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Read mine. I unfolded her letter. Tiff, baby. I miss you so much. I know Carissa poisoned you against me, but I forgive you. I have $15,000 hidden. I want you to have it, for the baby. Carissa doesn't need to know. She has enough. Just bring Leo to visit me, and I'll tell you where it is. We can start a secret fund for us. Don't tell your sister. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my veins. He's playing us, I whispered. He's pitching us against each other again. He's telling me it's for me, and telling you it's for you. And telling me to hide it from you, Tiffany added, her voice trembling. He thinks I'm still the same person. He thinks I'll sneak around behind your back for money. Is there money? I asked. Do you think it's real? Tiffany hesitated. He was always paranoid. He used to talk about bug-out bags. It's possible he hid cash. But Carissa? If we go, he wins. He gets control. I looked at Leo, drooling on his mat. He's using his son as currency, I said. He doesn't want to see Leo because he loves him. He wants to see Leo to prove he can still pull strings. I paced the small living room. The financial analyst in me was calculating the ROI. $15,000 for 1 hour of visiting time. It was a good trade financially, but the sister in me, the victim in me, knew the cost was higher. We're not going, I said. But the money. Tiffany started, the old avarice flickering in her eyes for just a second before she stamped it out. No, you're right. We can't. I have a better idea, I said. a cold plan forming in my mind. He wants to play games? Let's play. I called Stephen Lewis. Stephen, hypothetical question. If an inmate admits in writing to concealing assets from a federal restitution order, does that violate his parole eligibility? Stephen laughed on the other end of the line. It absolutely does. It's fraud. Again. Why? I have a letter, I said. 2 of them, actually. Bring them in, Stephen said. We won't get the money, Carissa. If he hid it, the state will seize it. You won't see a dime. But we can tack another 2 years onto his sentence. I looked at Tiffany. If we turn these letters in, the state takes the money, we get nothing. But Brandon stays in jail longer, or we play his game, try to find the money, and keep it. It was the ultimate test. The old Tiffany would have taken the risk for the cash. The old Carissa might have been pragmatic enough to consider it. Tiffany picked up Leo, holding him close. I don't want his money, she said firmly. I don't want dirty money in this house. And I don't want him thinking he can buy time with my son. She handed me her letter. Burn him, she said. 2 days later, Stephen filed a motion with the court, submitting the letters as evidence of continued deception and concealment of assets. The prison guards tossed Brandon's cell. They found nothing, but the damage was done. His good behavior record was torched. His parole hearing eligibility was pushed back. And he was moved to a higher security unit for attempting to solicit contraband. They assumed the money was for drugs or protection. He called my house one last time before his phone privileges were revoked. I answered. Hello, Brandon. You witch, he screamed. You stupid witch. You could have had 15 grand. I was going to give it to you. There was no money, Brandon, I said calmly. Was there? You just wanted a visit. You wanted to see if you still owned us. Silence on the line. Then, a dark chuckle. You think you've won, he sneered. But you're alone in that big house, aren't you? You'll always be alone because you don't trust anyone. I took your money, Carissa, but I also took your heart. Who's ever going to love a woman who treats life like an audit? I hung up. His words echoed in the empty kitchen. Who's ever going to love a woman who treats life like an audit? I looked at the phone. I looked at the 3 locks on my door. He was wrong about the money, but he was right about the fear. I had built a fortress, but I had locked myself inside. I took a deep breath. I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Mark Cabinetry. My thumb hovered over the call button. My heart hammered. Calling Mark was riskier than suing Brandon. Suing Brandon was logic. Calling Mark was hope, and hope is the most dangerous investment of all. I pressed the button. Hello? Mark's voice. He sounded surprised. Carissa. Hi, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Is that offer for a tool belt-free dinner still on the table? There was a pause. A warm, genuine pause. Absolutely, he said. When? Friday, I said. And Mark? Yeah? Use the front door. I'll unlock it. I hung up and leaned against the counter, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. Brandon was still in a cell, but for the first time in a year, I wasn't. A year is a strange unit of time. It's long enough for the seasons to cycle through completely, but short enough that you can still remember exactly what you were wearing the day your life fell apart. It had been 12 months since the trial, 18 months since the theft. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and my kitchen, the one Mark had lovingly finished, smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary. I wasn't alone. Mark was at the stove, humming an off-key tune as he stirred a risotto. Tiffany was setting the table, placing napkins with a precision she had never cared about before. Leo, now a chubby, wobbly toddler, was banging a wooden spoon against a pot on the floor. My parents were sitting at the island chopping vegetables. It looked like a normal family dinner, but if you looked closely, you could see the invisible scaffolding holding us up. Carissa, my dad said, sliding a bowl of chopped peppers toward Mark. I got that email from your financial advisor. The repayment schedule looks good. You're ahead of schedule. I am, I said, pouring wine for everyone. I should have the bridge loan fully paid off by Christmas. You don't have to rush, Mom added gently. We're fine. I know, I smiled. But I need to, for me. That was the new rule. Money was no longer a taboo subject we whispered about. It was discussed openly, clinically, and respectfully. There were no more secrets. My parents had finally stopped trying to save us and started treating us like adults. Mark turned off the stove. Dinner is served, risotto a la renovation. We sat down. Mark sat next to me, his knee brushing mine under the table. Dating Mark hadn't been easy. In the beginning, I was a nightmare. I flinched when he offered to pay for dinner. I panicked when he left his phone unlocked on the counter, fighting the urge to snoop. I interrogated him about his debts on our third date. I have a mortgage and a truck payment, he had told me calmly. Credit score is 740. No gambling debts. No hidden wives. He hadn't been offended. He understood. He knew he wasn't dating just a woman. He was dating a crime victim. He waited for me to lower the drawbridge. So, Tiffany said, breaking my reverie. She looked nervous. I have some news. The table went quiet. The old anxiety spiked in my chest. News usually meant trouble. Good news? I asked, gripping my wine glass. I think so, she said. I got a promotion. The dentist I work for. He noticed how I organize the filing system. He wants to train me as an office manager. It's a salary bump, a real one. That's fantastic, Tiff, Mom beamed. And, Tiffany continued, looking at me. With the raise, I can move out of Mom and Dad's place. I found a small apartment near the daycare. I can afford it on my own. No roommates, no help. She looked at me, waiting for approval. Can you afford the deposit? I asked, the analyst in me taking over. Yes, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. A budget planner I had bought her for Christmas. She opened it to a page filled with neat handwriting. I've been saving $200 a paycheck. I have the first last month, and the security deposit ready. She slid the notebook toward me. I looked at the numbers. They added up. I looked at my sister. She was wearing a blazer she had bought at a thrift store. She looked tired, yes, but she looked solid. She wasn't looking for a shortcut anymore. She was climbing the stairs. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. You've done the math. I learned from the best, she smiled shyly. Later that night, after everyone had left, Mark and I sat on the back porch. The autumn air was crisp. You know, Mark said, taking my hand. You didn't check your bank app during dinner. Not once. I laughed. I checked it before you arrived. Old habits. That's progress. He kissed my knuckles. How does it feel to have the house finished? To have the debt almost gone? I looked at the garden. The hydrangeas Tiffany and I had planted were dormant for the winter, but I knew they had deep roots. They would bloom again in the spring. It feels earned, I said. Before, I thought security was a number in a bank account. I thought if I hit $87,000, I would be safe. But the money didn't save me. It actually made me a target. And now? Now I know that security isn't the money, it's the boundaries. It's knowing I can survive losing the money. It's knowing I can rebuild. My phone buzzed on the table. It was an automated notification from the Illinois Department of Corrections. Inmate status update. Wilson, Brandon. I picked it up. Mark stiffened. Is he okay? He's been transferred, I read the notification. Maximum security. Apparently, he got into a fight in the yard. His parole hearing has been pushed back another year. I looked at the screen. A year ago, this would have sent me into a spiral of panic. I would have worried about his rage, his revenge. Now? It was just data. A distant fact about a stranger. He's still fighting, Mark noted. Still blaming the world? Let him fight, I said, putting the phone face down. He's fighting a ghost. We're not in that arena anymore. I thought about the letter Brandon had sent me about the hidden cash. There had been no cash. It was a lie, just as I suspected. But in a way, he had given me something valuable. He had given me the opportunity to say no. That no was worth more than $15,000. That no was the foundation of my new life. I have a question, Mark said, reaching into his pocket. My heart stopped. Oh God, is he proposing? I'm not ready. He pulled out a key. I made a copy, he said, of your front door key. You gave it to me last week when I came to fix the faucet. I forgot to give it back. He placed it on the table between us. I wanted to give it back to you. I know how important control is to you. I don't want to have access unless you explicitly want me to. I stared at the silver key glinting in the moonlight. Brandon had stolen my trust by taking what wasn't his. Mark was rebuilding it by returning what was mine. I picked up the key. I weighed it in my hand. "Keep it," I said. Mark's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "It's just a key," I said, closing his fingers around it. "If you steal my TV, I know where you live. And I have a very aggressive lawyer." He laughed, pulling me into a hug. "I love you, Carissa." "I love you too," I whispered into his shoulder. And the scariest part? I actually believed him. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was just hitting the brownstone. I made coffee and sat in my living room, my furnished, beautiful living room. I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. Balance, $12,450. It wasn't $87,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. Every cent of it was clean. Every cent was safe. I navigated to the transfer tab. I set up a new recurring monthly transfer. Recipient, Leo's college fund, custodial account. Amount, $100. I hit confirm. The cycle of theft ended with me. The cycle of building started now. I wasn't just saving for a house anymore. I was saving for a legacy. I closed the laptop, took a sip of coffee, and watched the sunrise over Chicago. I had lost a fortune to find my family. It was a steep price to pay. But looking at the life I had now, the honest, messy, real life, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally home. 2 years have passed since the day I walked into a police station to report my own family. Looking back, the timeline of my life isn't measured in years anymore. It's measured in before and after. Before, I was a woman who thought love meant setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. After, I became a woman who knows that true love never asks you to burn. We hosted Thanksgiving at my house this year. It was the first time the whole family had gathered for a major holiday since that reunion at the lake cabin. I was nervous. The trauma of the past doesn't vanish. It just becomes a quiet roommate. As I set the table, using the good china I finally allowed myself to buy, I had a fleeting moment of panic. Is my phone locked? Is my purse hidden? Then, I felt a hand on my back. It was Mark. "Everything is safe," he whispered, reading my body language as he always does. "You're safe." The dinner was loud and messy, but in the good way. Leo, now a chaotic 2-year-old, was throwing mashed potatoes at my dad. Tiffany was laughing, actually laughing, not the nervous, high-pitched giggle she used to have when Brandon was around. She was talking about her night classes. She's studying to be a dental hygienist. She pays her own rent. She pays for her own car. She's tired, sure, but she has dignity. There was an empty chair at the table. Not literally, we didn't set a place for Brandon, but his absence was felt. He is currently sitting in a cell in Pontiac Correctional Center. He sends letters sometimes. We don't open them. We collect them in a box, unopened, just in case we ever need them for a restraining order. He has become a ghost story we tell ourselves to remember what happens when you let a vampire across your threshold. At the end of the night, as I was walking my parents to their car, my dad stopped. He looked at the house, my brownstone, with its warm yellow windows glowing in the dark. "You built a good life, Carissa," he said. "I did," I nodded. "I'm sorry it cost you so much to get here," he added, his voice thick with the regret that still haunts him. I looked at the house. I thought about the $87,000. I never got it all back. Between the bridge loan repayment, the legal fees, and the lost interest, I probably lost about $40,000 in the end. A fortune, a down payment, a luxury car. But then I looked at my sister, buckling her son into his car seat, free from an abuser. I looked at my mother, who no longer excuses bad behavior. I looked at Mark, waiting for me on the porch. It was expensive, I told my dad, but it was worth every penny. Because I didn't just buy a house, I bought my freedom. I bought my self-respect. I bought the knowledge that I can survive the worst betrayal imaginable and come out the other side not bitter, but better. So why did I share this story with you? Because I know there are people watching this right now who are holding their tongue. Maybe you have a brother who borrows money he never returns. Maybe you have a parent who uses guilt like a weapon. Maybe you have a partner who tells you that your boundaries are selfish. They count on your silence. They count on your fear of rocking the boat. They bank on the fact that you value peace more than you value yourself. I'm here to tell you, rock the boat. Flip it over if you have to. Yes, it will be scary. Yes, people will call you names. Yes, it might cost you money or relationships or your reputation in the family group chat. But the price of staying silent is higher. The price of staying silent is your soul. My name is Carissa. I lost $87,000, but I found myself. And if you are in a situation where you feel used, trapped, or manipulated by the people who are supposed to love you, please take this as your sign. Check your accounts, change your passwords, and learn the most powerful word in the English language. No. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to stand up to a toxic family member, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. How did you handle it? What was your breaking point? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here, a family of people who choose truth over comfort. Until next time, protect your heart, protect your wallet, and remember, you are worth fighting for.